So the first of the 5 layers we just spoke about, the 5 tenets, is service strategy, and it's a really important first step. And if you skimp on this one, you will end up with problems later. So as is always the case, a good long think about what strategy you want from a service will set the right foundations for all the future discussions you have with your stakeholders and with your supplier. And there's sort of 4 main areas that is worth considering around the service strategy. The first one I really focus on is what they call service portfolio management. And what that is really thinking about what's the scope of the service, what are the little bits of things that are going to be delivered by the service, such that you can understand what the scope of it is, but also try and think about how it's going to change over time. And if you structure your portfolio of services correctly, you can make them quite easy to change. So understanding sort of discrete portfolio items will give you the ability to do some quite clever things in the future. So it's all about getting the structure right for that portfolio. The second one, which is probably most important from a procurement perspective, is financial management. And that's really understanding what the budget is, trying to understand how it's going to be charged, how you're going to do recharge internally, and therefore you can start talking to your supplier about how you want them to charge you. So that's getting into the detail of things like fixed price or unit charging, but all those sorts of things are going to be quite key to making sure that your supplier relationship is appropriate and that the charging for the service reflects what you're actually using, if that's the way you want to do it. The third one, which no one ever gets right, but is a really interesting one, is what they call demand management. And this is really volume forecasting. So if you're going to buy a service, how's it going to change over time in terms of the usage? So that's things like, if you're buying it per user, how many users are you going to have? Because that, if you get that right and you've got that demand view correct, that actually gives you a basis on which you can contract for a longer period of time. It gives you the basis on which you can design commercials that fluctuate based on that volume change. So all of those demand things, now no one gets it right because no one has a crystal ball. But asking the question of your stakeholders and making sure they've at least thought about it is a critical part of designing any service going forward. And the final one is a bit softer. It's known as business relationship management. And what that is how is the service going to be interfacing to some of your key stakeholders within the business. So understanding who your stakeholders are, understanding who's going to represent the users of a service, and making sure that your supplier has a relationship with those people and has a governance framework and a cadence to have conversations in a way that is productive, positive, and that relationship is built up. Also, having that right also means that any changes that are needed to be planned in for, you've got the relationship in place that your business relationship person, your sponsor or your stakeholder, can talk to the supplier or whoever's responsible for the service in a way that is proactive and they can get ahead of things. Without that relationship, your service will fail. So service strategy isn't massively complicated. If you have an idea of what the scope is, how much it's going to cost, what it's going to look like over time, and how the relationship's going to work, that gives you a really solid basis on which you can design a service. Now, as fascinating as ITIL service strategy is, I'm currently bimbling along at 11 knots towards one of the most impressive carriers in the UK fleet. So although I'm going to talk about IT, I'm going to be a little bit obsessive and a little bit proud of our Royal Navy, who is just about to come into dock in Portsmouth Harbour, which was not by design, I hasten to add. We only found out about this when we turned up on the boat. So a little moment to appreciate our Royal Navy whilst talking about ITIL service strategy. What's not to like?